I'm Réka Bucsi. I'm a Hungarian filmmaker. I'm an independent animation filmmaker. I'm mainly based in Hungary, but also in Denmark. That's how I make my movies. Usually I go to Denmark for that. Viborg has been part of my life for maybe 3 years. I went there for open workshop for the first time for the residency, and that's where I started to develop my first film after I graduated. My first short, it was called Love, and that's also the place where I started actually producing the movie. And yeah, it's a very special place because there's nothing really, the place, like it's a very genuine place with a lot of support for animation, and there's a lot of different projects going on there, which is a very inspiring and good environment to focus on your work and work with different people having different views on animation or game making or feature films, short films, like all sorts of formats of animation. So I like that remote little place where it's like an animation island in Europe. So Solar Walk is a very complex project because it was commissioned originally by the Aarhus Jazz Orchestra. Basically, like, it's a Danish production that was supposed to be this 47-minute long show, live show where the movie plays in the background, and there is 20 jazz musicians playing to the film. It's like a synced, like a Fantasia project. And so yeah, that was happening last year, and I finished with a small team in last year in August or September. And this thing went on tour in Denmark, and now we are trying to get it to various festivals who want to have a show like this. Flatpack Film Festival had it a couple of days ago in Birmingham. And there is a short film version of this show, which is 21 minutes long. So that's a short that travels on festivals. But the long version is, it's harder to get to people, of course, because it's a big band and it's a big show. But yeah, we finished approximately 50 minutes of animation last year. So that was a very fast kamikaze project. But it was very, it's a lot of learning that we got out of it. Animation, I found through my studies at MOME, at Moholy-Nagy University of Art and Design, where I spent 5 years. And before that, I wasn't someone who always knew, like, I want to be a filmmaker or I want to be an animator. I was sort of discovering the craft through my studies. And when I started it, I didn't even know if, how I will be able to live from this or how I will be able to build anything around this that is actually sustainable. But I was really, really just super in love with what you can do in animation and how much you can learn and how many possibilities there are. It's like I can't really compare this craft with anything else, not even live action filmmaking. It's just so unique in the texture of it and how you can play with the narrative. It's and picture and editing. It's not comparable to anything for me in terms of how you can express yourself in so many different things, like sound and colors, and take abstraction, take narrative, and put it together, and it works. And it is tough, but I think the world is more and more very open to these types of films. Even though we don't really have a platform, I feel like these films are so unique that I have a drive to just make them. And while I'm making them, or when I'm working with a team and we make them together, I don't feel like it's crazy. And once it's done, maybe a year of production, then I look back and I'm like, oh my God, what have we been doing? So when you are in it, I think it requires a sort of a little bit of an autistic view of sort of having this focus where you don't see anything else but the project you are in, and if you really like what you're doing, you're gonna not have a hard time doing that. I think in my case it was very, very organic, because MoMA also, the school sort of introduces you mainly to 2D cell animation. So for me I was always also coming from drawing comics. It was always all the characters I had, and everything was flat in a way. And then learning Photoshop and learning all these other techniques gave me like different brushes, so to say. But like I was still sticking to this 2D universe. And I think through the 5 years I went to the university, I was sort of experimenting with different styles, or like trying myself like everybody does when someone starts to do this thing. And I think naturally it somehow evolved through my films, but you can really see change from when I started and what I'm doing now. I also sort of opened up to more three-dimensional and merging 2D and 3D. I think that's something that I always want to explore, because it gets boring for me, it gets a little boring if I am sticking to one thing. I like to discover new ways of showing something visual, and maybe go back to like a more minimalistic approach sometimes, and then go crazy again with like very detailed things. It's very fun to play around between these things. I think being part of the whole community and actually being an active part of the animation world is very, very important to me for many different reasons, for also collaborative reasons, but mainly just because this whole craft is so time consuming and so strange to do sometimes. It's really nice to know that other people are also doing the same sort of thing. So just in general, the drive of other people is very inspiring to me. If I hear someone talk and I can feel that this person is legitimizing the fact that he or she is devoting him or herself to this 100%, and it takes so much of the time of this person, and still, they are so enthusiastic about it. I don't know, I was at Glass Festival a couple of months ago, and I heard so many good talks from Michael Frey to David O'Reilly. Both are very inspiring artists. I really love their work, and it's just generally very nice to hear someone's thought process about just the relationship that they have to the craft is very inspiring for me. And if any of these artists or my peers in general can do something or like finish something, I also have this drive. Okay, I need to like finish my thing that I have in mind, even if it's maybe a lot of time and energy. And yeah, the community is also very supportive. I think most of the time I have a feeling that it's always really like we like to share ideas and support. I haven't been talking to too many people who are thinking about making a feature film, but I think maybe people are starting to be a little bored by only seeing content in the cinemas for children, which is animation. So maybe some people are trying to break through like to a more adult audience in a feature format, which is very rare. Like I rarely see a feature animation that is talking to an adult audience in a cinema, and I would love to see more of that. And I'm also thinking about making a feature film, or planning on making a feature film, because of the lack of interesting films in the cinemas for feature animation. I'm talking at the Wild and Strange section, and my talk is called Learn to Unlearn, and it's about It's mainly about my work, but I'm sort of talking about how rules and breaking those rules define what I do. Trying to question specific rules in filmmaking or in general, like truths about the world, and making them my friend, sort of turning them into something else. And I'm sort of also mainly focusing on storytelling and narrative, because I get a lot of comments about my movies not having a story. And I'm sort of questioning that in my talk. So I'm sort of trying to raise some questions about what is a story and what qualifies as a story, what isn't a story. And I think it's a very relevant and very interesting question. There's also a lot of my animation peers are dealing with these critiques, and they sort of have to excuse themselves. And I think that that's not right, because if there is a narrative that's alternative or different, it doesn't necessarily mean there is no story or there is no narrative. Yeah, it's a lot about abstract and experimental approach to storytelling. I have been visiting FMX twice before when I was a student, and I remember coming here just to look around and watch some talks, but I remember not understanding much of it because it's such a tech focused conference. But to my work, how is it relevant? It's not that relevant to my work, but I think that's because it's so interesting to see also how these the big industry works. And I think it's good to have sort of get at least a feel for like how that works, and see a little bit of insight into the big studios, which I am totally not part of that system. It's interesting for me. It's very foreign.